I am 60 years old. I am sitting in an office that feels far too large for this time of night, watching the city lights through the tinted glass. The marble under my feet is heated, but memory doesn't learn the temperature. It stays cold, trapped in that Tuesday of 1984. I was 18. I held a sketchbook where I tried to draw a future that didn't include manual labor in the outskirts. The kitchen was small. The clock on the wall always ticked louder than it should. The coffee was reheated, the plate empty. My mother didn't look at my drawings. She looked at the clock, then at the plate. "You're just one more mouth to feed." There was no scream, no anger, only the dry tone of someone discarding an old piece of furniture because it takes up space. In that instant, I understood that she didn't hate me. She was doing math, and I was a liability, a number that needed to be cut. For many, this moment would be the beginning of the fall, the point where hope turns into lament and life begins to demand explanations. For me, it was something else. As the rain beat against the tin roof and silence filled the kitchen, I realized something that isn't taught. No one was coming to save me. And that was liberating. Machiavelli knew that only those who depend solely on what they control are free. By throwing me out, she cut the last invisible thread that still tied me to the blackmail of affection. Those who don't expect support cannot be charged with gratitude. Those who have nowhere to return to learn to walk forward. I left home with no promises, no net, no secure address. I closed the door behind me and, for the first time, I felt something like sovereignty. I had no allies, I had no comfort, but I also had no masters. That phrase, "a mouth to feed," should have broken me. Instead, it gave me something rarer, the 0 point. The place where you don't ask for permission because there is no longer anyone to ask. I spent 3 years at Vance's logistics hub, industrial zone, smell of cold metal and diesel oil. Vance was a low-level predator, the kind of man who measures someone's value by the width of their back and how quickly they lower their gaze. I accepted the lowest rung. I became a piece of organic furniture among the steel containers. It was there that I inaugurated my ghost phase. School teaches you that success is a team sport. Religion speaks of congregation. The market speaks of networking. It's all poison. These are lies designed to ensure you never try to walk alone. The moment you seek support, you are admitting you are powerless. I did the opposite. I dove into absolute silence. I became invisible. Vance shouted schemes into the phone, discussed bribes, and revealed financial vulnerabilities 2 meters away from me as if I were a post. He made the classic mistake. He believed that someone he didn't respect was incapable of processing information. To him, I was just an arm that moved boxes. To me, he was an open book written in bold, predictable letters. As the iron dust mixed with my sweat, my mind worked with the precision of a scalpel. I mapped the guts of his business. I saw where the capital leaked and who he was deceiving. Absolute isolation gave me X-ray vision. I had no distractions, no friends to listen to laments, no home to run to. I had only my hunger and the icy patience of an executioner. There, in the midst of the filth, I realized that my mother's rejection had been my greatest gift. I was no longer a herd animal begging for belonging. I wasn't looking for a master. I was just gathering the keys to the kingdom that Vance dropped on the floor out of sheer arrogance. 3 years at that logistics hub were my anatomy class of greed. I was still technically the mouth to feed, but now one that knew the exact weight of every one of Vance's lies. He had a main client, Dr. Arnaldo, one of those men who buy imported marble to hide their poverty of spirit. Vance was skinning him alive, charging for steel loads that never left the yard. I saw the diversions, the duplicate invoices, and the contempt with which he treated me while I moved the pallets. To him, I was just landscape, an extra in his theater of mediocre corruption. On an afternoon of acid rain, Vance made the mistake I was waiting for. He left the ledger open while humiliating a supplier on the phone. I didn't steal money. I stole something much more lethal: the direct contact of the offshore partner he used to clean the material. That night, sitting on the floor of the boarding house, I understood that loyalty is a contract that only exists between equals. For someone treated as a nuisance, betrayal is not a crime. It's poetic justice. Guilt is a luxury for those who had a mother who taught them to be good. Mine had taught me only not to starve to death. I looked for Dr. Arnaldo. I didn't go as the boy asking for a job, but as the man who held the key to the vault. When I showed him the numbers, I saw the blood drain from his face. He asked my price for silence. I didn't ask for a commission. I asked for the logistics contract for his entire next project. He hesitated, looked at my worn clothes, and I simply said, "Vance has the name, but I have the eyes. He will keep robbing you because he thinks you're stupid. I only want what he is too dumb to keep." At that moment, the extra mouth revealed its teeth. The taste of the first profit filled the void of 1984. I didn't need support. I was now the support the market needed. Power is not born of affection. It's born of pure, cold utility. Isolation wasn't loneliness. It was structure. From 25 to 40, my world shrank to a basement that smelled of stale coffee and silence. At 3 in the morning, while the city slept wrapped in comfort, the fluorescent lights hummed above my head. That sound became familiar. My eyes burned from insomnia, but I accepted it. Fatigue was the price. Sleep belongs to people who have somewhere to return to. I didn't. That absence gave me speed. I remember Miller, a competitor who still believed in strategic partnerships. He invited me to dinner, talked about joining forces against the larger players. He drank slowly, spoke carefully, offered protection disguised as cooperation. I watched the slight tremor in his left eyelid. Fear always leaks through the body. He was afraid to move alone. I had already died once in 1984. There was nothing left to protect. I refused his handshake without explanation. The next morning, before he finished breakfast, the exclusivity contract he wanted was already signed, without him. While he searched for support,
I moved on the target. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't clever. It was faster. People called me cold, said I had no heart. I let them talk. The need to be loved is a vulnerability most men never overcome. I buried the version of myself that needed approval. When exhaustion asked for mercy, I didn't negotiate. I kept going. Over time, something quieter replaced the noise. In isolation, concrete teaches you. It doesn't comfort, it resists. You learn how much force is required to keep standing. I didn't run on motivation, I ran on endurance. I wasn't preparing to be admired. I was making sure that when the lights finally came on, there would be only one chair left, and it would already be occupied.
Success is a frequency that attracts vultures. At 50, the door of this office opened to the ghost of 1984. My mother didn't come to ask for forgiveness. She came to present an invoice. I saw her sitting in that leather armchair, her face withered by time, but her eyes still sharp, mapping the value of the art pieces on the walls while she spoke of family and blood ties. She didn't see a son. She saw the balance sheet reported in the press. Listening to that rehearsed speech about late maternal love, I felt an icy clarity. I realized that interest is the only language people speak without an accent. Forgiveness is a social tool for the weak. Boundaries are a power tool for the sovereign. If I had yielded to sentimentality, I would be validating the idea that she had the right to harvest where she never planted. I felt no hatred. Hatred requires an emotional connection that I had already amputated at the bus station decades ago. I signed a check, the exact amount so that she would never again have a pretext to look me in the eye. The sound of the pen on the paper was the only noise in the room. When I handed her the paper, I saw her gaze shift from my face to the number written there. Her hand didn't tremble with emotion. It trembled with financial relief. I called security without saying a word. As she left, I understood that blood is just a biological fact, not a contract of loyalty. I had paid my last debt to the past, not out of gratitude, but out of sovereignty. As I closed that door, I realized that the greatest freedom money gave me was not luxury, but the right to say no to someone who before saw me as a mouth to feed, and now saw me only as a bank to exploit. The cycle was closed. I owed nothing to my creator. At 58, the Sterling Group tried to corner me. They were heirs with porcelain smiles and last names that opened doors where I was never invited. They called the meeting on a 40th floor that smelled of expensive perfume and sterile confidence. On their side, 10 occupied chairs, directors, lawyers, and a cloud of advisors who noted my every breath. On my side, only my notepad and silence. They looked at me with ill-disguised pity, as if I were an old wolf who had forgotten that the world now belongs to the packs. Their CEO launched the proposal, a merger that was, in truth, a surrender disguised as structural support. While he spoke, I observed the almost imperceptible tremor in his left eyelid. They were anxious. They needed my cash flow to stop the hemorrhage of their subsidiaries. In the middle of his speech about synergy, I stood up. I didn't ask for permission. While they consulted lawyers about a comma in the contract, I made a single 90-second call. I had already mapped their jugular vein weeks before, the shipping company that was the only lung of their business. When I returned to the table and closed my notepad, the air in the room had changed. The CEO received a message on his phone and his face lost its color. They realized, too late, that the man who climbed the mountain alone has legs of steel, while those lifted by helicopters fall with the first gust of wind. I left that room not with partners, but with the remote control of their destiny. Isolation was not my punishment. It was my speed. Today, at 60, the reflection in the glass shows a survivor who stopped bleeding a long time ago. I look at the lights outside, and I don't just see a city. I see a board where every glowing dot is a gear I helped move or a will I forced to retreat. Often, in the dense silence of this office, the sound of the acid rain of 1984 hits the glass of my conscience again. I hear my mother's voice, dry and pragmatic, reducing my existence to one more mouth to feed. That phrase, which should have been my end, became my steel foundation. My greatest victory doesn't reside in the heated marble or the millions in liquidity. It resides in my clean record of gratitude. I look at my contact list, and I don't find a single name to whom I owe an explanation, a return favor, or a piece of my destiny. There is no godfather. There is no emotional investor. There is no one who can knock on this door and say that I got here because he gave me a hand when I was at 0 point. Gratitude is a debt that never stops yielding interest. It is the most refined form of submission disguised as virtue. I preferred the cold of isolation to never having to pay the price of forced loyalty. If you are still listening, it is because you feel the weight of an ambition that no one around you understands. You are tired of asking for permission to be great and of looking for support that, in truth, is just the net that will catch you later. The world will try to convince you that isolation is a flaw, a lie. They want you dependent because dependency is the first step toward control. The top is lonely by design. The crown was not designed to be shared with someone who didn't bleed alone on the way up. I am no longer the mouth to feed. I am the owner of the table, and the table is set for only one. The banquet of absolute sovereignty does not accept last-minute guests. If you're still here, the 0 point has already marked you. You know what it's like to be treated as a liability. I don't ask you to subscribe for support. I don't need it. Make it a contract with yourself, a signal that the era of asking for permission is over. Here, you choose the truth that hurts over the lie that comforts. I applied 11 ruthless laws to go from a mouth to feed to the owner of the table. They were my only support when I had no one. If you are ready for the banquet of sovereignty, click the video now. I will reveal the first law to you. Welcome to the 0 point.